Today we're going to talk about Trump encouraging his supporters to vote twice and commit voter fraud, and getting caught saying some pretty vile things about American service members. And I interview Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, where we talk about whether Michigan voters are buying Trump's coronavirus dismissals, his insistence on fomenting violence in American cities, and how Michiganders' voting rights are being protected in a state that saw Trump win in 2016 by only 10,000 votes. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. Leave it to the guy who has spent all of 4 years railing against imaginary voter fraud to then encourage voter fraud. So here's where we're at. Trump was in North Carolina for one of his mid-pandemic rallies that definitely won't have any consequences, and he said this.
600,000 people could vote by absentee in this state. Are you confident in that system?
Well, they'll go out and they'll vote, and they're going to have to go and check their vote by going to the poll and voting that way, because if it tabulates, then they won't be able to do that. So let them send it in and let them go vote. And if their system's as good as they say it is, then obviously they won't be able to vote. If it isn't tabulated, they'll be able to vote. So that's the way it is, and that's what they should do. I don't like the idea of these unsolicited votes. I never did. It leads to a lot of problems. They've got 11 problems already on very small contests, so I'm not happy about it. At the same time, we're in court on a lot of it. We're going to see if it can be stopped. But send in your ballots, send them in strong, whether it's solicited or unsolicited. The absentees are fine. We have to work to get them. It means something. And you send them in, but you go to vote. And if they haven't counted it, you can vote. So that's the way I view it.
That you should vote by mail, and then you should go to the polls to check on your vote. And if you don't see it, you should vote in person too. Now, there are a few problems here. The first problem, as you might have guessed, is that this is voter fraud. This is the literal definition of voter fraud. Like, we've been hearing for years out of the Trump camp about these insane conspiracy theories when it comes to voter fraud, that 3 to 5 million undocumented immigrants voted in California. Trump said the only reason he lost New Hampshire was because out-of-staters drove in and cast ballots. He said the only reason that Republicans lost the midterms was because people would, and this is a direct quote, go to their car, put on a different hat, put on a different shirt, come in and vote again. All of this is like the stuff of an OANN fever dream. They are so desperate to make you believe that voter fraud is happening that they're trying to convince us that people are like putting the fake Mr. Potato Head glasses with the nose and mustache on to sway the results of a federal election. Meanwhile, the guy just told his supporters to vote twice. He said vote by mail and then go on over to the polls. The only way this could be clearer voter fraud is if he just said, go do voter fraud. And of course, what came after was the usual parade of Republicans following along behind Trump to say that, in fact, yes, he was right, and this is completely normal, and no, not illegal in the slightest. So first we had Bill Barr.
It sounds like he's encouraging people to break the law and try to vote twice.
Well, I don't know exactly what he was saying, but it seems to me what he's saying is he's trying to make the point that the ability to monitor this system is not good. And if it was so good, if you tried to vote a second time, you would be caught if you voted in person.
That would be illegal if they did that. If somebody mailed in a ballot and then actually showed up to vote in person, that would be illegal.
I don't know what the law in the particular state says.
You can't vote twice.
Well, I don't know what the law in the particular state says, and when that vote becomes final.
Is there any state that says you can vote twice?
Well, there's some, maybe that you can change your vote up to a particular time. I don't know what the law is, so I'm not going to offer.
He was saying test the system.
If you know what he's saying, why are you asking me what he's saying?
He doesn't believe in the mail-in voting. You're the Attorney General of the United States.
Why does you? Yeah.
This is the Attorney General, the top law enforcement official in the United States of America, pretending that he'd have to check on the individual state before he could say with certainty whether voting twice is illegal, as if there is any individual states where voting twice is legal. And then after Bill Barr, we had Kayleigh McEnany.
The president is not suggesting anyone do anything unlawful. What he said very clearly there is make sure your vote is tabulated, and if it is not, then vote. Basically, when you get a absentee ballot and you send it in, there are poll books, and it is recorded that you have tried to vote, that you have in fact voted. And if you show up at a polling site, they look at the poll book and say your vote's been counted. He wants verification. Democrats want a whole new fraudulent system of mail-in voting, never tried before in American history. And what Democrats are saying to you is trust us, but don't verify.
And her thing was that polling locations would have a polling book that would confirm whether your vote had been received. But here's the problem. There are almost a dozen states that don't even begin counting until after the polls close. So how could you tabulate those votes? What about states where ballots are still counted after Election Day so long as they're postmarked in time? How do you tabulate those votes? You can't. Meaning that you're going to have these Trump-inspired vigilantes putting on their election security capes and taking matters into their own hands. And then they'll cast that in-person ballot because Donald J. Trump told them to on the TV, and then that'll be the last vote they cast for a really long time because voter fraud is a felony. And even after their prison sentences, depending on the state that they live in, felons are often disenfranchised, meaning that they might not even be able to vote again. Like, the extent to which Trump's gut instinct is to screw over his supporters is mind-boggling. Just think about some of the examples. Between pushing hydroxychloroquine, even after it was found to have caused cardiac issues, to telling people to inject disinfectant, which led to a nationwide spike in calls to poison control centers around the country, to holding rallies in the middle of a pandemic, which led to his own advisor Herman Cain dying. Like, I can go on, but the point here is that there is nothing and no one that Donald Trump isn't willing to sacrifice to win some arbitrary point. Like, any normal person would see that hydroxychloroquine isn't performing well in trials and cut your losses before you inflict any more damage. Just like any normal person would be able to acknowledge, okay, yeah, maybe don't vote twice. But Trump is only led by his ego. So because he said it once, then that's his position forever. He's pot committed, and he will defend that position even if 100,000 of his own supporters get arrested on voter fraud charges, because every single hill is a hill worth dying on for him. So with that said, Trump's malignant narcissism aside, let me use this opportunity to offer this. First, and I don't know who needs to hear this, don't vote twice. I found that not voting twice has been a really great way to stay out of jail. I would recommend everyone try it. Second, if you're voting by mail, you can track your ballot in 41 out of 50 states. So if you get your ballot and fill it out and stick it back in the mailbox with plenty of time before November 3rd, or if you drop it off in a Dropbox, or even if you bring it in person to the Board of Elections office, you can go online and track your ballot in every single state except for a few, except for Maine, New York, Connecticut, Hawaii, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Mississippi, and New Mexico. Every other state, you will know when your vote is tabulated. It's easy, it's fast, it's not a felony, so please take advantage. Okay, next I want to talk about reporting from The Atlantic, outlining comments reportedly made by Trump where he called American soldiers who died in war losers and suckers for getting killed, that he wanted wounded veterans to be kept out of military parades because, quote, nobody wants to see that he needed to know who the good guys were in World War I, and that he didn't understand why the U.S. would intervene on the side of the Allies, and that he didn't want to lower the flags to half-staff to honor John McCain after he died. And the White House came out right away in full force to deny this story. Trump even took to Twitter to deny having ever called John McCain a loser, which I gotta say might have carried just a little more weight if Trump wasn't on camera literally calling John McCain a loser in 2015.
And I said, somebody should run against John McCain, who has been, in my opinion, not so hot. And I supported him. I supported him for president. I raised $1 million for him. It's a lot of money. I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that, because I don't like losers.
There is no better way to find out exactly what Trump does than to wait for him to deny something, because he will divulge every single verifiable detail in his denial. The best validation of the truth is Trump insisting that something is a lie. And aside from Trump's own denials, things actually got worse for him when other news outlets began corroborating The Atlantic's reporting. And That's including Fox News. Fox's Jennifer Griffin confirmed basically all of the reporting, which of course led to a Trump Twitter meltdown demanding that she be fired. And even Mark Esper, Trump's defense secretary, who was in France during one element of the Atlantic story, said, quote, President Trump has the highest respect and admiration for our nation's military members, veterans, and families. This is why he has fought for greater pay and more funding for our armed forces. Yes, there are a lot of platitudes, but there's no denial there. At no point does Esper say that any of the Atlantic's reporting is false. So either he just forgot to deny the claims at the heart of this scandal, or there's nothing to deny. And look, beyond the corroborations and the lack of denials, let's just use common sense here. Of course the reporting is true. I mean, come on. Trump has attacked Gold Star families. He refused to do a single thing when he found out that Putin placed bounties on our soldiers' heads. He used the military as a front to siphon money into his failing Turnberry resort in Scotland. He abandoned the Kurds in northern Syria, which deprived our troops of one of their top allies in their fight against ISIS. He skipped a World War I ceremony because he didn't want to get his hair wet. The guy concocted a disease to avoid going to war that then miraculously disappeared. Like, we could go on forever. Donald Trump's disdain for our military isn't just unsurprising, it's well documented. It's common knowledge. So the only way Trump calling the troops suckers would be more believable is if he followed that up with a rant about low-pressure shower heads. So with that said, the question here isn't so much, did he say it? It's, does it matter? Like, I know a lot of people are listening to this and thinking, yeah, of course he said those things. Of course he's depraved. The problem is that no one cares on the right. And I would normally tend to agree. Typically, if you're the president and you oversee the deaths of 190,000 Americans and you're able to keep your supporters, those people are probably going to stick with you. Like, gonna go out on a limb and say that if locking kids in cages didn't steer them away, they're pretty much a lock, right? But here's the thing. This isn't migrant kids in cages. These are American troops. These are, the red-blooded Americans that Trump panders to. And so while the idea of a migrant from Guatemala getting apprehended at the border and put in a detention center might not move a military mom or dad, hearing Donald Trump refer to their son or daughter as a sucker for risking his or her life might just be a different story. And the fact that the White House came out so hard and so fast to try and discredit this story is proof of that. Trump made a statement at midnight the day that this reporting dropped. That's not an accident. You gotta figure that if they're panicking, it's for good reason. And that is because Trump getting exposed for having attacked a beloved subset of his own base and then having that corroborated by his own favorite pet network can actually hurt him. And in an election where every vote counts, where we're trying to overcome margins of just a few thousand voters in a few swing states, having to deal with a scandal like this could make a difference. So I get that the inclination is to shrug off these scandals because what would normally end another politician's career is a Tuesday for Donald Trump, but we're less than 2 months out from an election, and what this does is serve as proof that not only can't Trump govern, but that his character is enough to push people away. Maybe you voted for him for his personality, maybe you voted for him because of his agenda, but he has proven that they're both liabilities. The unemployment rate's at 10%, 13 million Americans have lost their jobs, we're coming up on 200,000 coronavirus deaths, and now he's attacking American military members? The fact is that there is no upside with this guy. And things like this are only giving people permission to finally be able to acknowledge that. To listen to my interview with Governor Whitmer, check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. That's it for this episode. Talk to you next week. You've been listening to No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, produced by Sam Graber, music by Wellesley, interviews captured and edited for YouTube and Facebook by Nicholas Nicotera, and recorded in Los Angeles, California. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your preferred podcast app. Feel free to leave a 5-star rating and a review, and check out BrianTylerCohen.com for links to all of my other channels.